a young black nanny was fired for teaching kids about diversity, but when she confronted the white family, the soft glow of dawn crept through the curtains of a modest apartment in the heart of Boston. Zara Thompson stirred, her hand reflexively reaching for her phone to silence the alarm before it could disrupt the peaceful morning. At 23, Zara possessed a quiet determination that belied her youth. Her deep brown eyes, often alight with warmth and curiosity, now blinked away the last vestiges of sleep as she prepared for another day. As Zara went through her morning routine, her mind wandered to the path that had led her to this moment. Growing up in a close-knit community in Roxbury, she had always been surrounded by the love and support of her family. Her mother, Evelyn, worked tirelessly as a nurse at the local hospital, while her father, Marcus, balanced his time between his job as a high school history teacher and his passion for community activism. From an early age, Zara had been instilled with a strong sense of identity and purpose. Her parents had made sure she understood the richness of her African American heritage, as well as the challenges she might face in a world that didn't always value diversity. But they had also taught her to approach life with an open heart and an unwavering belief in her own worth. Zara's childhood home had been filled with books, lively discussions, and a revolving door of neighbors and friends. It was in this nurturing environment she had discovered her love for children. Whether it was helping to care for her younger cousins or volunteering at the local community center's after-school program, Zara found joy in nurturing young minds and hearts. As she finished getting dressed, Zara's eyes fell on the framed photograph on her dresser. It showed her standing proudly in her cap and gown, flanked by her beaming parents on her college graduation day. The memory of that day, just over a year ago, brought a smile to her face. Zara had worked hard to earn her degree in early childhood education from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. She had juggled classes with part-time jobs and internships, determined to make the most of the opportunity her parents had sacrificed so much to provide. Her dream was to one day open her own preschool, a place where children from all backgrounds could learn and grow together. Dreams, as Zara was learning, often took time to realize. The reality of student loans and the competitive job market in education led her to explore other options in childcare, which was how she had found herself working as a nanny for the past 6 months. As Zara grabbed her bag and headed out the door, she thought about her current position with the Caldwell family. The job had seemed like a perfect opportunity when she first started. Chance to gain more experience working with children while saving money for her future plans. The Caldwells lived in an affluent suburb of Boston, in a house that seemed more like a mansion to Zara. They had 2 children, Emma, a precocious 4-year-old, and Liam, a curious and energetic 2-year-old. Commute from Roxbury to the Caldwells' neighborhood was long, requiring Zara to navigate 2 bus transfers. As she settled into her seat on the first bus, Zara pulled out a worn copy of The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. The book, a gift from her father, chronicled the great migration of African Americans from the South to the urban North. Zara found herself drawn to these stories of resilience and hope, seeing echoes of her own family's journey in the pages. As the bus wound its way through the changing landscape of Boston, Zara's mind drifted to her first meeting with the Caldwells. Mrs. Rebecca Caldwell, corporate lawyer, had been polite but reserved during the interview. Mr. James Caldwell, who worked in finance, had barely looked up from his phone. It was the children, Emma and Liam, who had immediately warmed to Zara, their excited chatter and curious questions making her feel instantly at ease. Past 6 months had been a mix of rewarding moments and subtle challenges. Zara loved spending time with Emma and Liam, nurturing their curiosity and watching them grow. She took pride in helping Emma learn to read and in teaching Liam new words every day. The children's laughter and unconditional affection made even the most tiring days worthwhile. However, there were times when Zara felt an undercurrent of tension in the household. Sometimes it was a fleeting look from Mrs. Caldwell or a dismissive tone from Mr. Caldwell. Other times, it was comments from visitors or neighbors that made Zara acutely aware of her status as both an employee and the only person of color in the predominantly white neighborhood. Zara had learned to navigate these moments with grace and professionalism, drawing on the strength and wisdom her parents had instilled in her. She reminded herself that her work was important, that she was making a positive impact on Emma and Liam's lives. And yet, there were nights when she returned to her apartment feeling drained, questioning whether she could continue in this position long-term. As the bus approached her second transfer point, Zara tucked her book away and gathered her things. She took a deep breath, centering herself for the day ahead. Whatever challenges she might face, she was determined to face them with dignity and compassion. After all, as her mother often reminded her, change often came through small, everyday acts of kindness, perseverance. Stepping off the bus, Zara straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. The morning sun was now fully risen, casting a golden glow over the tree-lined streets. In the distance, she could see the imposing silhouette of the Caldwell house. Another day was beginning, full of possibilities and potential hurdles. But Zara Thompson was ready to face it all, armed with her education, her values, and an unwavering belief in her own worth. As she walked the final blocks to the Caldwell residence, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different somehow. There was a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that she couldn't quite place. Little did she know that the events of this day would challenge her in ways she had never expected, forcing her to confront difficult truths and make choices that would shape not only her future, the lives of those around her. With a final deep breath, Zara rang the doorbell of the Caldwell house. As she waited for someone to answer, she silently reaffirmed her commitment to approaching each day with openness, empathy, and strength. Whatever lay ahead, Zara was determined to face it with the same grace and resilience that had brought her this far. The sound of approaching footsteps from within the house brought Zara back to the present moment. As the door began to open, she put on her warmest smile, ready to greet Emma and Liam and begin another day in the complex world of the Caldwell family. The door swung open, revealing Mrs. Rebecca Caldwell, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her blue eyes, usually cool and distant, held an unusual spark of agitation this morning. "Zara, you're here." "Good," Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice clipped. "We need to talk. Come in." Zara stepped into the foyer, a sense of unease settling in her stomach. The house was unusually quiet. The children's usual morning chatter was noticeably absent. "Where are Emma and Liam?" Zara asked, trying to keep her tone light. "They're upstairs with James. He's working from home today," Mrs. Caldwell replied, leading Zara into the expansive kitchen. "Sit down, please." Zara took a seat at the marble island, her hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Caldwell remained standing, her posture rigid as she fixed Zara with a stern gaze. "Zara, something concerning has come to our attention," Mrs. Caldwell began. "Emma's teacher called yesterday. She's worried about some of the things Emma has been saying in class." Zara's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm not sure I understand, Mrs. Caldwell. Is Emma having trouble at school?" Mrs. Caldwell's lips thinned into a tight line. "Not academically, no. But she's been talking about race. She told her classmates that people with different skin colors are treated unfairly. She even suggested that her own family might be racist. Do you have any idea where she might have gotten such notions?" The implication hung heavy in the air. Zara felt her heart rate quicken. She took a deep breath, determined to remain calm and professional. "Mrs. Caldwell, I assure you, I've never said anything inappropriate to Emma or Liam about race or racism. We've had some conversations about diversity because Emma is naturally curious about the world around her. But I've always kept things age-appropriate and positive." Mrs. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly does age-appropriate mean to you, Zara? Because I don't think it's appropriate for my 4-year-old to be worried about racism or to be questioning her family's values." Zara felt a flicker of frustration, but she pushed it down. "Mrs. Caldwell, children are naturally observant. Emma notices that I look different from her family, and she asks questions. I've simply explained that people come in many different colors, and that's what makes the world beautiful and interesting. I've never suggested that anyone is treated unfairly or used the word racist." At that moment, Mr. Caldwell entered the kitchen, his presence filling the room. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown that deepened as he looked at Zara. "Problem, Zara," he said, his voice low and controlled, "is that you're here to care for our children, not to educate them about social issues. We don't pay you to fill their heads with complicated ideas about race relations." Zara felt a surge of indignation. "Mr. Caldwell, with all due respect, I am an educated professional with a degree in early childhood education. Part of my job is to help the children understand the world around them. Can't simply ignore their questions about diversity." Mrs. Caldwell exchanged a look with her husband before turning back to Zara. "We appreciate your education, Zara, but we have our own values and beliefs about how to raise our children. We're not comfortable with you discussing these topics with Emma and Liam." Zara took a moment to gather her thoughts. She could feel the conversation veering into dangerous territory, but she also knew she couldn't stay silent. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, I understand your concerns, but Emma and Liam live in a diverse world. They're going to have questions about differences they see, and it's important to address those questions honestly and openly. Ignoring them or pretending differences don't exist can actually lead to more prejudice and misunderstanding." Mr. Caldwell's face reddened. "Are you suggesting that we're promoting prejudice in our own home?" "No, not at all," Zara said quickly. "I'm simply saying that children are naturally curious, and it's better to guide that curiosity than to suppress it." Mrs. Caldwell's voice was cold when she spoke again. "Zara, we hired you to care for our children, not to push your personal agenda. If you can't respect our wishes in this matter, perhaps we need to reconsider this arrangement." The threat hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Zara felt a mix of emotions: anger, hurt, and a deep sense of disappointment. She had grown to care deeply for Emma and Liam, and the thought of leaving them pained her. But she also knew she couldn't compromise her principles or her professional integrity. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Zara said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "I care about Emma and Liam very much, and everything I do is with their best interests in heart. I don't have a personal agenda beyond helping them grow into kind, understanding individuals." Mr. Caldwell scoffed. "And you think we don't want that for our own children? We don't need you to teach them how to be kind. We need you to stick to your job description." Zara stood up slowly, her back straight and her chin lifted. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, my job is to care for your children in every sense, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. I can't separate those aspects of caregiving. If you feel that my approach is incompatible with your values, then perhaps you're right. Maybe this isn't the right fit." A tense silence filled the room. Mrs. Caldwell's face was a mask of cold disapproval, while Mr. Caldwell seemed to be struggling to contain his anger. Zara's heart was pounding. She maintained her composure, drawing on every ounce of strength and dignity she possessed. The silence was broken by the sound of small feet on the stairs. Emma's voice floated down, full of excitement. "Zara? Zara, are you here?" Before anyone could respond, Emma burst into the kitchen, her face lighting up at the sight of Zara. She ran to hug her, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Zara, I missed you. Can we read that new book today? The one about the girl who looks different from everyone in her class but becomes friends with everyone?" Zara felt a lump form in her throat as she hugged Emma back, acutely aware of the Caldwell's scrutinizing gazes. In that moment, the contrast between Emma's innocent enthusiasm and her parents' hostility was stark and heartbreaking. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Emma, sweetie, go back upstairs. Zara needs to leave now." Emma looked up, confusion clouding her young face. "But why? Zara just got here. We always read together in the morning." Mrs. Caldwell stepped forward, her voice artificially bright. "Not today, honey. Zara has some other things she needs to do. Go on up, and I'll be there in a minute to read with you." Emma's lower lip trembled as she looked between Zara and her parent. But I want Zara to stay. She's my friend." Zara knelt down to Emma's level, fighting back tears. "Emma, sweetie, I have to go now. But I want you to remember something, okay? You have a beautiful heart and you ask wonderful questions. Never stop being curious about the world and the people in it. And always be kind to everyone, no matter how different they might seem." Emma threw her arms around Zara's neck. I don't want you to go, she whispered. Zara hugged her back tightly, knowing this might be the last time. I know, sweetie. I don't want to go either, but sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions. Just remember that I care about you very much, okay? As Zara stood up, she saw a flicker of something, perhaps doubt or regret, cross Mrs. Caldwell's face. But it was quickly replaced by a cool, detached expression. I'll mail you your final check, Mrs. Caldwell said. Please gather your things and leave your key on the table. Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She gave Emma one last smile, then turned and walked out of the kitchen, her head held high despite the weight of sadness and injustice pressing down on her. As she collected her few personal items and placed her key on the entryway table, Zara could hear Emma's muffled sobs from upstairs. The sound broke her heart, but it also strengthened her resolve. She knew she had done nothing wrong, but only tried to nurture and educate the children in her care as best she could. With a deep breath, Zara opened the front door and stepped out into the morning sunshine. As she walked down the driveway, away from the Caldwell house, she felt a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, disappointment, but also a sense of pride in standing up for her principles. The confrontation with the Caldwells had been painful, but Zara knew it was just the beginning. As she reached the end of the driveway, she turned back for one last look at the house. In an upstairs window, she saw Emma's small face pressed against the glass, her hand raised in a sad wave. Zara waved back, then turned and continued walking. She didn't know what the future held. She was determined to face it with the same courage and integrity she had shown today. The road ahead might be difficult. Zara Thompson was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The days following Zara's abrupt dismissal from the Caldwell household were a blur of emotion and uncertainty. As she sat in her small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of her life as a nanny, craft supplies, children's books, and photos of Emma and Liam, Zara felt a profound sense of loss and injustice. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends and family who had heard about what happened. Zara's parents, Evelyn and Marcus, particularly concerned. They had raised their daughter to be strong and principled. They also worried about the impact this incident would have on her future. Zara, honey, her mother's voice was warm but tinged with worry during their nightly call. Have you considered filing a complaint? What they did, it's not right. Zara sighed, running a hand through her curly hair. I know, Mom, but it's not that simple. They'll say they let me go because of a difference in childcare philosophies, not because of my race. It's my word against theirs. Father's deep voice joined the conversation. That may be true, but staying silent won't change anything. Sometimes we have to stand up, even when it's hard. As she pondered her parents' words, Zara's phone pinged with a new email notification. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was from Mrs. Caldwell. With trepidation, she opened the message. Zara, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to inform you that we've decided to withhold your final paycheck due to concerns about your performance and the negative impact you've had on our children. We're also considering legal action if you continue to contact Emma or attempt to influence her in any way. Please do not attempt to communicate with us or our children again. Rebecca Caldwell. Zara stared at the screen in disbelief, hands shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. She had never attempted to contact Emma after leaving the Caldwell house. The accusation was as false as it was cruel. Zara, are you still there? Her mother's voice brought her back to the present. They're withholding my last paycheck, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. And they're threatening legal action if I try to contact the kids, which I haven't even done. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then her father's voice, usually so calm, came through with an edge of controlled fury. That's it. This isn't just about childcare anymore. This is blatant discrimination and wage theft. We're not letting this stand. Over the next few days, Zara found herself swept up in a whirlwind of activity. With her parents' encouragement, she reached out to a local civil rights organization that provided legal aid. The lawyer they assigned to her case, a kind but fierce woman named Amelia Rodriguez, listened to Zara's story with growing indignation. What the Caldwells are doing is illegal, Amelia explained during their first meeting. withholding wages and making threats based on unfounded accusations. We have a strong case here, Zara. But I want you to understand, if we pursue this, things might get uncomfortable. Are you prepared for that? Zara took a deep breath, thinking of Emma's curious questions, Liam's toothy grins, and the Caldwells' cold dismissal. She thought of all the other nannies and domestic workers who might be facing similar situations in silence. Yes, she said firmly, I'm ready. As Amelia began the legal process, filing complaints with the labor board, and preparing for potential court action, Zara found herself thrust into the spotlight she had never sought. A local journalist, intrigued by the story, reached out for an interview. Initially hesitant, Zara agreed after discussing it with Amelia, hoping that sharing her experience might help others in similar situations. The article, published in a popular online news site, painted a vivid picture of Zara's experience with the Caldwells. It highlighted the broader issues of racial discrimination in domestic work and the importance of having open, honest conversations about diversity with children. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Zara's phone and email were flooded with messages, some supportive, others accusatory. Former colleagues from her college and previous jobs reached out with words of encouragement, but there were also angry messages from people who accused her of playing the race card or trying to indoctrinate children with liberal propaganda. Caldwells, through their lawyer, released a statement denying any wrongdoing and painting Zara as a disgruntled ex-employee trying to extort money from them. They claimed that Zara had been let go due to unprofessional conduct and attempting to undermine parental authority. As the legal battle began to unfold, Zara found herself struggling with the emotional toll of it all. She missed Emma and Liam terribly, worrying about how they were coping with her sudden disappearance from their lives. The stress of the situation affected her sleep, her appetite, and her overall well-being. One particularly difficult day, as Zara was walking home from a meeting with Amelia, she noticed a car slowing down beside her. Her heart raced as she recognized Mr. Caldwell behind the wheel. "You're making a big mistake, Zara," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Drop this ridiculous lawsuit now or you'll regret it. No one will hire you after this. You're ruining your own future." Before Zara could respond, Mr. Caldwell sped away, leaving her shaken on the sidewalk. She reported the incident to Amelia and the police, but it left her feeling vulnerable and afraid. Despite the challenges, Zara found strength in unexpected places. Her community rallied around her, with neighbors offering words of support and local organizations reaching out to stand in solidarity. Her former professors from UMass Boston expressed their pride in her courage and offered to serve as character witnesses if needed. Even in the midst of the turmoil, Zara never lost sight of her passion for early childhood education. She volunteered at a local community center, helping with their after-school program. Working with the children there reminded her of why she had chosen this path in the first place, and it gave her the strength to continue fighting. As the weeks passed, the tension continued to mount. The Caldwells, realizing that Zara wasn't backing down, became more aggressive in their tactics. They reached out to Zara's former employers, attempting to dig up any dirt they could find. They even hired a private investigator to follow her. Fact that Zara only discovered when Amelia caught wind of it and took legal action to stop the harassment. The stress began to take its toll on the Caldwell family as well. Neighbors reported hearing arguments coming from the house, and Emma's teacher noticed that the once bubbly child had become withdrawn and sad at school. One day, as Zara was leaving the community center after her volunteer shift, she was surprised to see a familiar face waiting for her. It was Mrs. Caldwell, looking tired and conflicted. "Zara," she said, her voice lacking its usual coolness. I think we need to talk." Zara felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a flicker of hope. Could this be the turning point they all needed? As she agreed to hear Mrs. Caldwell out, Zara knew that whatever came next would be crucial in determining not just the outcome of the legal battle, but the larger fight for understanding and equality. With a deep breath, Zara prepared herself for a conversation that had the potential to change everything. The path forward was uncertain. She was determined to face it with the same courage and integrity that had brought her this far. The community center's parking lot was nearly empty as Zara and Mrs. Caldwell faced each other. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows, mirroring the weight of the moment. Zara's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, waiting for Mrs. Caldwell to speak. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Mrs. Caldwell asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. Zara nodded, leading them to a nearby park. They settled on a bench, the sound of children playing on distant swings, a poignant backdrop to their conversation. Mrs. Caldwell took a deep breath. "Zara, I owe you an apology. The way we handled your dismissal was wrong, and the actions we've taken since then, they're inexcusable." Zara remained silent, allowing Mrs. Caldwell to continue. "When Emma's teacher called about her comments on race, we panicked. We've always prided ourselves on being colorblind. We thought that by not discussing race, we were somehow being progressive. But now I see that we were just being willfully ignorant." Mrs. Caldwell's eyes welled with tears. "Emma's been asking about you every day. She doesn't understand why you left, and honestly, neither do I anymore. We've made such a mess of things." Zara felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, sorrow, and a cautious hope. "Mrs. Caldwell, I appreciate your apology, but you have to understand how much hurt your actions have caused. Not just to me, but to Emma and Liam as well." Mrs. Caldwell nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know, and that's why I'm here. I want to make things right, but I don't know how. James, he's still angry, still wants to fight this in court, but I can't do it anymore. I can't keep pretending that what we did was okay." As Mrs. Caldwell spoke, Zara found herself reflecting on her own journey over the past weeks. The pain and anger she had felt were still there, but they were tempered now by a deeper understanding of the complexities of race and privilege. "Mrs. Caldwell," Zara began, choosing her words carefully, "what happened between us is bigger than just our personal conflict. It's a reflection of deeper issues in our society, issues that we need to confront, not ignore." Mrs. Caldwell looked at Zara, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. "I'm starting to see that now, but I don't know where to begin. How do we talk about these things without making it worse?" Zara thought for a moment. "It starts with listening, really listening, to people of color, to our experiences, our fears, our hopes, and it means being willing to be uncomfortable, confront your own biases and privileges." As they talked, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The conversation flowed more freely now, touching on personal experiences, societal expectations, and the challenges of raising children in a diverse world. Mrs. Caldwell shared her own background. Growing up in a predominantly white, affluent neighborhood, rarely interacting with people of color outside of service roles, she admitted to the discomfort she felt when confronted with discussions of race, a discomfort that had led to avoidance rather than engagement. Zara, in turn, opened up about her experiences as a young Black woman in America. She spoke of the subtle microaggressions she faced daily, constant awareness of her skin color in certain spaces, and the weight of representing her entire race in predominantly white settings. As night fell, they found themselves at a crossroads. Conversation had been enlightening, but the question remained, where do they go from here? "Zara," Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice firm now, "I want to make this right, not just legally, but morally. I'll talk to James. We'll drop any legal threats, pay you what we owe, and provide a glowing reference for your next job. But I was hoping we could do more than that." Zara raised an eyebrow, curious. "I think our community, our privileged, predominantly white community, needs to have these conversations. Would you consider working with us to create a diversity and inclusion program? For parents, for schools, for anyone willing to learn." The proposal took Zara by surprise. It was an opportunity she had never imagined, a chance to create real change, but it also came with risks and potential for further hurt. "I'm not sure, Mrs. Caldwell," Zara said honestly. "This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about Emma and Liam, about all the children in your community. If we do this, it has to be genuine. It can't be just for show or to ease your conscience." Mrs. Caldwell nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I'm ready to do the work, really do it. For Emma and Liam, for our community, and because it's the right thing to do." As they parted ways that evening, both women felt the weight of the conversation and the potential for change it held. Zara knew she had a lot to consider. She would need to talk to her parents, to Amelia, to really think about what taking on such a role would mean. That night, as Zara lay in bed, her mind replayed the conversation with Mrs. Caldwell. She thought about Emma and Liam, about the other children in their community who might benefit from honest, open discussions about race and diversity. She thought about her own dreams of opening a preschool, creating an environment where all children felt valued and understood. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and challenges, but there was also hope. Hope for understanding, growth, for real and lasting change. As Zara drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Whatever she decided, she knew that this experience had changed her, had reinforced her commitment to education and equality in ways she never expected. The next morning, Zara woke early, her mind clear and resolved. She had decisions to make, conversations to have, and possibly a new journey to embark upon. As she prepared for the day, she felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The road ahead would not be easy, but Zara Thompson was ready to walk it, one step at a time, towards a future where understanding and equality were not just dreams, but reality. 1 year had passed since that pivotal conversation in the park between Zara and Mrs. Caldwell. The autumn leaves were once again turning golden and red, mirroring the transformative journey that had unfolded in the intervening month. Zara stood at the podium in the Fairfield Community Center, looking out at the diverse faces before her. The room was packed with parents, educators, and community leaders, all gathered for the culmination of a year-long initiative on diversity and inclusion. When I first came to this community, Zara began, her voice clear and confident, I was just a nanny, trying to do my best for the children in my care. I never imagined I'd be standing here today, addressing all of you about the importance of having open, honest conversations about race and diversity. Her eyes found Mrs. Caldwell in the audience, who gave her an encouraging nod. Next to her sat Mr. Caldwell, his expression thoughtful and engaged. Far cry from the angry, defensive man of a year ago. The journey to this moment had been far from easy. After their conversation in the park, Zara had taken time to carefully consider Mrs. Caldwell's proposal. She had long discussions with her parents, with Amelia, and with herself about the potential risks and rewards of taking on such a role in the community. In the end, it was a conversation with Emma that had tipped the scales. Mrs. Caldwell had arranged for Zara to meet with the children, to explain her absence, and to gauge if a continued relationship was possible. Zara! Emma had cried, running into her arms. I missed you so much. Why did you go away? Did we do something wrong? Holding the little girl close, Zara had made her decision. She couldn't change the past, but she could help shape a better future. For Emma, for Liam, and for all the children who deserved to grow up in a world that celebrated diversity. The first few months of the initiative had been challenging. Some community members were resistant, arguing that discussing race would only create problems where none existed. Others were enthusiastic, clumsy in their effort, inadvertently causing offense in their attempts to be inclusive. Zara had to navigate these choppy waters carefully, drawing on her education, her personal experiences, and the support of allies like Mrs. Caldwell. They organized workshops, book clubs, and discussion groups. They worked with local schools to review and revise curricula to be more inclusive and representative. Mr. Caldwell, initially skeptical, had become an unexpected ally. After attending a particularly powerful workshop on privilege and systemic racism, he had approached Zara with newfound humility. I owe you an apology, his voice gruff with emotion. I was wrong, not just in how we treated you, but in my whole understanding of race in America. I want to do better. For my kids, for this community. His transformation had been slow but genuine. He used his connections in the business world to bring diversity initiatives to local companies, and he became a vocal advocate for fair hiring practice. As Zara continued her speech, she reflected on the changes she had seen over the past year. The Caldwell children, now 5 and 3, were growing into empathetic, socially aware young people. Emma, in particular, had blossomed. Her natural curiosity about the world, now supported by parents who encouraged open discussions about diversity. This journey hasn't been easy, Zara continued, addressing the audience. We've had uncomfortable conversations. We've made mistakes. We've had to confront hard truths about ourselves and our society. But look at how far we've come. She gestured to the room where people of various races, ethnicities, and backgrounds sat together, engaged and united in purpose. A year ago, this community was divided by misunderstanding and fear. Today, we're here together, committed to creating a more inclusive and equitable environment for all our children. As Zara concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment tinged with humility. She knew that their work was far from over. Changing deeply ingrained societal attitudes was a long-term process, one that required constant effort and vigilance. After the event, as people mingled and chatted, Zara found herself approached by a young black woman clutching the hand of a small boy. "Miss Thompson?" the woman said hesitantly. "I'm Keisha. I recently started working as a nanny for a family in the neighborhood. I just wanted to thank you. Your program, it's made such a difference. My employers actually asked me about my experiences with racism, asked how they could be better allies. I never thought I'd have that kind of conversation with them." Zara felt a lump form in her throat as she shook Keisha's hand. This was why she had taken on this challenge. This was why all the difficult conversations, all the setbacks, all the moments of doubt had been worth it. As the community center slowly emptied, Zara found herself standing with the Caldwells. Emma and Liam, tired from the long event, leaned against their parents, but their eyes were bright as they looked up at Zara. "We've come a long way," Mrs. Caldwell said softly. "But we've still got a long way to go, don't we?" Zara nodded, smiling. "As we do, but we're on the right path, and we're walking it together." Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Zara, we've been thinking, that preschool you've always dreamed of opening, we'd like to help make that happen. A place where diversity and inclusion are built into the foundation. What do you think?" Zara felt her heart skip a beat. Her dream, the one that had seemed so distant a year ago, suddenly felt within reach. I don't know what to say. That would be amazing." As they discussed the possibilities, Zara felt a tugging on her sleeve. She looked down to see Emma gazing up at her with serious eyes. "Zara," the little girl said, "when you open your school, can you teach everyone the thing you taught me? About how being different is what makes the world beautiful." Zara knelt down, hugging Emma close. "That's exactly what I plan to do, sweetheart. That's exactly what I plan to do." As Zara walked home that evening, cool autumn air filled with the scent of fallen leaves, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a young girl in Roxbury with big dreams, to a nanny facing discrimination, to a community leader helping to shape young minds and change old attitudes, the road hadn't been easy, and she knew there would be more challenges ahead. But as she looked up at the stars twinkling in the darkening sky, Zara felt a sense of hope and purpose stronger than ever before. She had faced adversity and emerged stronger, not just for herself, but for all the children who deserved a world where diversity was celebrated and every voice was heard. With a heart full of gratitude and determination, Zara walked on, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. The story that had begun with a confrontation born of ignorance and fear had transformed into a testament to the power of education, empathy, and the unyielding human capacity for growth and change. And for Zara Thompson, for the Caldwell family, and for their entire community, it was only the beginning.